Should we? Okay, so I'm hoping that this is streaming.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay, sorry again, everyone. My first time, so. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Siddhantotpala Saranityarasikam Hangsam Vilasatmakam Odaryakya Sudama Sevaka Dhanam Vishramba Bhakti Pradam Yachna Jukti Vichakshanam Tvagabiro Vaishishta Shaktya Sada Vandeham Tripurari Namakayatim Shri Bhakti Vedantinam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Swami Shri Bhakti Vedanta Prabhupadaya Te Namaha Gurvagyam Shirasi Dritva Shaktya Vesha Swarupine Hare Krishneti Mantrena Paschatya Prachatarine Vishvacharya Prabharjaya Divya Karunya Murtaye Shri Bhagavatam Adurja Gita Jnana Pradayine Gaura Shri Rupa Siddhanta Saraswati Nishevine Radha Krishna Padam Bhoja Bringaya Gurave Namaha Devam Divyatanum Suchanda Vadanam Balarka Chelanchitam Sandrananda Puram Sadeka Varanam Vairagya Vidyamburim Shri Siddhanta Nidhim Subhakti Lasitam Sarasvatanam Varam Vande Tam Shubhadam Adeka Sharanam Nyasishvaram Shridharam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So, thank you everyone for coming. Let's see. So I'm going to speak on the first chapter of Bhagavad-gita. Almost exactly 10 years ago, I received some instructions on how to study the first chapter from my Guru Maharaj, Swami Bhaktivedanta Tripurari. And he gave me 8 points. So I was thinking that throughout this month, I'm going to cover them. And the first point is, what is the significance of the two names for chapter 1? So the two names for chapter 1 are, one is Vishada Yoga, which is the yoga of despair. And Guru Maharaj makes the point that we are all always in despair, but it requires some sukriti for us to turn that despair into a yoga. There is the verse further on in Bhagavad-gita in 7:14, where it talks about the 4 types of people who turn towards Krishna, and it's 4 types of. It's actually it's one type of person. It's a person who has sukriti, and people who have sukriti will surrender to Krishna in 4 different circumstances. One is when they are suffering. One is if they desire wealth. One is if they're curious, and one is if they are in knowledge of the self. So one can be in knowledge of the self. One can suffer. One can want wealth, and one can be curious, but without having sukriti, and then one will not surrender to Krishna in a situation like that. But Arjuna is turning to Krishna in his despair, and as has been pointed out, we turn to the Bhagavad-gita in our despair, if we are fortunate. And so this is like an ancient chapter title name for this chapter, Vishada Yoga. It was used by the ancient commentator Sridhar Swami. And then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who was the first in our lineage to give a full commentary on Bhagavad-gita, he changed the name, or he used another name for this chapter, which is Sainya Darshana, which is observing the armies on the battlefield. And this is the chapter title that also Prabhupada is using in his Bhagavad-gita as it is. Whereas my Guru Maharaj has gone back to the old one, Vishada Yoga. So the Sainya Darshana name of the chapter, observing the armies on the battlefield, may refer both to Duryodhan, how he's observing the armies and comparing them and speaking to Bhishma. And it can also be Arjuna when he is observing the armies. Next point in studying the first chapter or like the second instruction I got was to be prepared to give an overview of the entire chapter and explain its significance. And the significance is like it's the chapter that kind of ties, because Bhagavad-gita appears in Mahabharata, as I'm sure all of you know. So the first chapter is kind of the kind of getting into the setting where Bhagavad-gita is spoken, and then from the second chapter, Krishna is starting to give instructions. Like it is said that Krishna starts speaking in the second chapter, but he says a few important words in the first chapter also. He says 4 words, I believe. And we will get to that. Let's see. But first, I was thinking to just get a view of who is like when we are reading the text, who is it that is speaking? Because Vyasadeva is the one narrating the story as a whole, like the whole Mahabharata. But in this instance here, he is narrating how Sanjaya is narrating. So it's a narration within a narration. So in the first verse, it's Vyasadeva narrating Dhritarashtra speaking to Sanjaya. Dhritarashtra is asking Sanjaya what is happening at Kurukshetra, where his sons and the sons of Pandu have assembled to fight. In the next verse, Vyasadeva still narrating. Sanjaya is speaking to Dhritarashtra telling him that he alludes to the superiority of the Pandavas, and he alludes to Duryodhana's silver-tongued speech that is about to come. And I said the wrong name before. Duryodhana is speaking to Dronacharya, not to Bhishma. So from verses 3 till 11, Duryodhana is speaking to his, I think to his general, or Dronacharya, praising their own army, and kind of saying how, but at the same time saying that we will all lay down our lives, which has the kind of deeper meaning that actually they will all die on the battlefield. Then from text 12 to 20, it's Sanjaya speaking to Dhritarashtra about how everyone starts blowing the conches, and the war is about to begin. Then it's Arjuna speaking to Krishna, asking him to move the chariot so that he can see the two armies. And then Sanjaya speaks to Dhritarashtra, narrating how Krishna moves the chariot, and here comes the 4 words or so in Sanskrit that Krishna says to Arjuna. It's, see all the Kurus assembled here. And this is very important, because Guru Maharaj makes the point that, like, here is where Krishna is showing Arjuna all of his attachments. And so like this is the point of the first chapter. Like, Krishna is showing us our attachments, and Guru Maharaj makes the point that that devotees often go on for, like, read on from there, but without actually processing what Krishna is saying there. And then from text 28 to 45, Arjuna speaks to Krishna, and that's where he's giving all his reasons for not fighting in the war. And finally, Sanjaya speaks to Dhritarashtra, telling him that that Arjuna drops his bow, which is a shocking event, because Arjuna is known as the best fighter. Then the third point is to explain how the entire message of the Gita is found in the first verse. And here, because like in the words of the first verse, you can kind of draw out everything from there, like from the lowest of the low to the highest of the high, like from the depth of material attachment to the heights of spiritual perfection. And this is seen, there are several articles written about this. Of course, there is my Guru Maharaj's commentary on the first verse of the Gita, and then Ashram Maharaj wrote an article about that it's on the Harmonist, From Selfishness to Selfless Love, in the first verse of the Bhagavad-gita. So the verse goes, Dhritarashtra uvacha, dharma kshetre kurukshetre, samaveta yuyutsava, mamaka pandavas chaiva, kima kurvata Sanjaya. Dhritarashtra said, O Sanjaya, what did my sons and the sons of Pandu do after assembling on the religious field of Kurukshetra, eager to fight? And so what is symbolizing, or what is showing here, the kind of the low point is the word mama. because Dhritarashtra is asking, what did my sons and the sons of Pandu do? As if they are two families, but it's actually one family that has become split. And this is very much because of Dhritarashtra's attachment to his own sons. So they are cousins fighting on either side of the battlefield. So the low point is this that we identify with this body, and we identify as ours what is related to this body. But then the high point of the verse is that it says Kurukshetra. So the whole battle is played out on Kurukshetra, and it's not the first time that Krishna is there. He has been there several times, but most notably 50 years before this, when he met the gopis there. So just the word Kurukshetra is like brings the Gaudiya Vaishnavas' minds to I believe it's the 82nd chapter of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, in the conversation between Krishna and the gopis there. And then we also have the in-between in this verse here, like how to get from this low point to the high point is shown by the word Sanjaya, which is the name of the speaker here, who is speaking to Dhritarashtra, narrating the battle. So the word Sanjaya means complete victory, and it means complete victory over one's senses. So conquering one's senses through dharma, one goes from the low point of material attachment to the high point of spiritual perfection. And I wanted to read from what I mentioned before, why it's important to study chapter 1. The few words that Krishna speaks in the first chapter. So this is I'm reading from the Yoga of Dejection by Satyanarayana Das Babaji. Commenting on this verse, text 25 in the first chapter. Krishna placed the chariot between both armies, and furthermore, directly in front of Bhishma and Drona, though so many other kings were present. He then said, "O Arjuna, behold the Kauravas assembled here." There was no need for him to say this, as Arjuna had already twice declared that he wanted to observe who desired to fight. Krishna's purpose was to lay threadbare Arjuna's attachments, and thus he chose the word Kurun, which indicates his relatives on both sides. Instead of Dhartarashtran, which specifically refers to the sons of Dhritarashtra. By doing this, he presented before Arjuna the two things he was most attached to: his family members, headed by Bhishma, and his gurus, headed by Drona. At this moment, Arjuna was face to face with his attachments. The message implied is that if one wants to be with Krishna, one has to abandon all attachments unrelated to the Lord. This incident also signifies that the Lord reveals one's attachments. Bhishma was a lifelong celibate, well versed in the intricacies of Varnashram duties. He was a great fighter who could hold off death until he desired it. Furthermore, he was one of the 12 Mahajans, or authorities on Dharma, and a great devotee of Krishna. Drona was a Brahmana, a sage, and the favorite teacher of Arjuna. He was also devoted to Krishna. However, since they had been seduced by Duryodhana's clever politics and were on the wrong side, they had to be killed. Krishna was teaching Arjuna that if he wanted his guidance, if he wanted him to drive his chariot, he would have to sever his attachment for everyone who was on the wrong side. Not only that, but Arjuna would have to kill them himself. Of the many warriors from the opposing army, Bhishma and Drona were most prominent. If they could be killed, the rest would easily be disposed of, and victory would bow at Arjuna's feet. This is why Krishna positioned the chariot in front of Bhishma and Drona. The primary instruction of the Bhagavad-gita is found in Krishna's declaration in the final chapter: abandon all other duties and surrender unto me. By this, he does not mean partial surrender like that of Bhishma and Drona, who, though great personages, had placed their obligation to Duryodhana before their surrender to Krishna. Krishna does not accept this compromise. He demands complete surrender. Even great stalwarts like Bhishma and Drona had to be killed. Bhishma's favorite Pandava was Arjuna. If someone is a skilled athlete, he generally likes it when other junior family members become accomplished athletes. Similarly, if one is a talented musician, he feels drawn to other good musicians in his family, especially when they come in his own dynasty. Bhishma was an Atirati, and so was Arjuna, and thus they had special affection for each other. A great fighter is especially inclined to other fighters in his family. Arjuna was the best disciple of Dronacharya, who loved Arjuna like his own son. Drona taught things to Arjuna that he would not even teach to his son Ashwatthama, such as how to retract a Brahmastra weapon. It is intriguing to note that Drona once made Arjuna take an oath in the presence of his relatives that if Drona would ever oppose him in battle, he should nevertheless fight with full vigor, disregarding that Drona was his teacher. Such great persons stood before Arjuna while Krishna said, "Behold the Kauravas, O Arjuna." Duryodhana had also told Dronacharya to look at the Pandavas, as he would have to oppose them in battle. But his motive was different. So here, Krishna told Arjuna that he had to kill his greatest attachments. Then he smiled and awaited Arjuna's reaction. This is an intense and significant event, and one should try for a moment to put oneself in Arjuna's place. Imagine your family members and gurus in front of you, and Krishna tells you that if you want to be on his side, you have to kill them. Killing here means giving up attachment to such people or concepts. Coming to spiritual life means that all attachments unrelated to Krishna will be exposed in due course, and everyone has to undergo this trying experience. The same relations or attachments can be viewed independently or in relation to Krishna. For example, parents or teachers can be regarded as independent relations or as representatives of Krishna. The former view is the cause of bondage and is thus to be abandoned by a spiritualist, while the latter leads to progress. People often say that their minds were more peaceful before they took to spiritual practice. When they chant or meditate, many nonsensical thoughts plague their minds and make them restless. Why does this happen? These disturbing thoughts came from within, and the more one practices, the more one becomes aware of them. They are lying, hidden in a seed form, and Krishna reveals them to his devotee so he can fight and overcome them. One cannot conquer an unknown enemy. That is an illusion. Krishna is not a magic helper who touches your head and makes you perfect. He makes you fight and earn progress or advancement. He will place your chariot directly in front of your attachments, and you will have to confront them. Actually, if after seeing and recognizing the obstacles, one decides to fight, victory is already assured. It is just a matter of time. Thus, while showing the universal form to Arjuna, Krishna said about the warriors on the field, "They are already killed by my arrangement. Just become an instrument in the fight." After identifying the enemy, one has to decide whether or not to fight with them. Arjuna first decided not to fight, and this is generally how people react. Those who decide not to fight cannot progress beyond the first chapter of the Bhagavad-gita. And this is what happens to the majority of people who approach the spiritual path. They never get to the second chapter of the Gita in terms of practical action. They may read, recite shlokas, and give lectures, but they don't factually progress past the first chapter, owing to a lack of sincerity. Arjuna's admirable quality was that he was sincere and willing to accept good instruction. He was thoughtful and thus able to recognize his weakness, cowardice, and attachment. At first, he decided to flee from the field, but thereafter he chose to listen to Krishna, which is what most people fail to do. They fail to listen to Shastra. They rationalize their actions, as Arjuna did in the first chapter, and spend their lives posing as spiritualists. They don't progress, however, because true spirituality begins from the second chapter. For the uncommitted practitioner, running away from the battlefield doesn't generally entail abandoning spiritual life altogether, but rationalizing his attachments and compromising with wrong deeds. Externally, such a person seems to be pursuing the path, while internally he seeks various routes of escape. This type of hypocrisy goes unnoticed by common people. The first chapter describes the problem facing the candidate and how he deals with it according to the misconceptions he has heard from various sources. He rationalizes and even quotes scripture to substantiate his conclusions. Even the devil can do this, but he will not accept what the Shastra and Krishna say. The Gita stresses the importance of understanding the problem, becoming aware of how the mind can deceive us, and accepting the solution offered by Krishna. Next, we will see how Arjuna became completely bewildered and refused to fight. At this stage, he accurately portrays those who come to spiritual life with some determination, but after a few years of floundering, they again indulge in material comforts, all the while speaking on lofty spiritual topics. So, some strong words. And yeah, this has stuck with me here because Guru Maharaj has been like repeating in his lectures this commentary, and it's as Arjuna Maharaj was mentioning on his class on Tuesday, that ahamta and mamata is our anchor in this world, and it means I-ness and mine-ness, what we consider I and what we consider ours, and the cure for that is to understand that that I am Krishna's and Krishna is mine. And I also had some thoughts because I was thinking what is the point of me speaking all this when I have attachments, and speakers with attachments are not going to change very much the hearts of those who listen, or even himself. But then I thought of the the woodcutter whom Vyasadeva is sending to Shukadev to speak some Bhagavatam verses to attract him back to Badarikashram. And so hopefully there are some Shukadevs out there that may have heard this. I wanted to read Srila Sridhar Maharaj's narration of that, because it's interesting. It's that story. I always thought it was in the Bhagavatam, the story of the Vyasadeva and the woodcutter and Shukadev, but it's from Brahma-vaivarta Purana in some edition that it's not available anymore. But Jiva Goswami is quoting it in Tattva Sandarbha. Because Shukadev left home as soon as he was born, and Vyasadeva wanted him to hear the Bhagavatam. So he knew that Shukadev could only be attracted by something that was higher than self-realization, because Shukadev was already self-realized. And so the only thing that it says in Brahma-vaivarta Purana is that Vyasadeva somehow or other made Shukadev hear some Bhagavatam verses, and then in the oral tradition it has become the story with the woodcutter, and some people say that it was actually Vyasadev's disciples. Vyasadeva sent out his disciples to chant verses, and hoping that Shukadev would somehow hear them out in the forest somewhere. So here's Srila Sridhar Maharaj. There are also many theories about which Bhagavatam verses, but Srila Sridhar Maharaj has his opinion, and he's repeating it 3 times here. So he really thinks it should be Canto 10, Chapter 1, Text 4, that the woodcutter or disciples were reciting. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj says that he was feeling about Shukadev leaving. He was feeling that moksha, the Brahma Gyan, has been given the highest position. Now the higher conception that has been given to me by Narada Muni must be delivered to the world by a person whose Brahma Gyan is unquestionably admitted by all the scholars. So he searched for Shukadev. Shukadev is the only person who is very widely respected by the so-called liberationists. This higher doctrine should be brought to light through him, and then the position of Bhagavatam will be automatically unchallengeable. So he hunted after Shukadev. He sent a woodsman whose business it was to cut down trees in the jungle and dense forest, and who made a trade from that. He told this shloka to that woodcutter. Nivrita tarshair upagiya manad, bhava shaudach chotramano biramat, ka uttama shloka gunanu vadat puman virajeta vina pasugnat. Wherever you will find a boy like my son, you will try to chant this shloka. You always wander in the dense forest, and my boy is there, roaming hither and thither in the jungle. It is very difficult to trace his whereabouts because he does not stay in one location, always roaming and wandering. He lives on only leaves and fruits, and he takes water from the river. Suddenly one day, this shloka caught Shukadev's attention. What do these woodcutters say? Nivrita tarshair upagiya manad, bhavo shadach chotra mano biramat, ka uttama shloka gunanu vadat puman virajeta vina pasugnat. This big sound with high meaning, where did they get it from? Then after hearing twice, thrice, he approached them. What do you say? They again repeated, Nivrita tarshe rupagiya manad. Who have had all their thirst quenched, satisfied, they come and sing this song. Bhavo shadhat, it is the medicine for the solution to birth and death. Shrotra mano bhiramat, and it is always pleasing to the senses. The senses should not be considered as one's eternal enemy and eliminated from any utility. They can be utilized. This song is very sweet for all the senses. Shrotra mano bhiramat, both the ear and mind are pleased by a high class of joy. Ka uttama shloka gunanuvadat, puman virajeta vina pasubnat. Who but a suicide will keep such a conception of life, such a model ideal of his life at a distance? Only a self-killer can do so. Otherwise, one who is wakeful to his real interest can never avoid the Uttama Shloka Gunanuvada, the praise and prayer of the highest entity, the Lord Absolute. Who can keep himself aloof from this highest conception of life, which is beyond even moksha? Then, after having a glimpse into the meaning of this shloka, this poem of Bhagavatam, Shukadev inquired, where did you obtain this shloka? At Badarik Ashram. Can you show me the place? Yes, come. And they took him to Vyasadev. He could recognize, oh, this is my father's ashram. Vyasadev, my father, requested me to stay with him, but I did not care for that. I ran away to the forest to avoid human society. To avoid being influenced by human society's designing attitude, I left it. However, for the solution I find in this shloka, I cannot but inquire from him. So he came and asked his father the meaning of the shloka. Srila Vyasadev then explained according to the angle of vision that Devarshi Narada had recently given him. So he heard. So Shukadev heard from the woodcutter, and then he went directly to Vyasadev himself, because it is important. Like we may hear something at first from, like we may pick up a book somewhere or hear from some practitioner about Krishna, but then we need to go to those who have realization. It's nice how like if we read when we read the text of Bhagavad-gita, and we can meditate on how it's traditionally said to have come, that it was Ganesh writing it down, listening to Vyasadev speaking, and Vyasadev is repeating what he's hearing from Sanjaya, and he was choosing Sanjaya to narrate the story of the Battle of Kurukshetra because he was highly qualified, because he was without attachment. So you have someone without attachment narrating, and then you have Vyasadev, who's also without attachment, narrating to Ganesh. And Ganesh also has this deal with Vyasadev that he can only write down if he understands. So even just it's like what we are reading is not just someone who heard something high, but someone who heard it and understood it before they wrote it down also. So it's very potent. Even more nice to meditate on is that there is said to be a manuscript of Bhagavad-gita in Gauridas Pandit's temple in Ambika Kalna. So when you read the Bhagavad-gita text, you can meditate that you have that copy in front of you, that it's Mahaprabhu's own handwriting. Okay, that is all I can think of for now. if anyone has any questions or want to share something about the Bhagavad-gita, maybe someone has had nice experiences reading from the first chapter.
Pranam Syamananda, it's Gurnishta here. Can you hear me, Syamananda?
Oh, I have to allow people to unmute. How do we do that? Where are the settings?
Mute audio, mute all, stop.
Okay, so I'm not sure how to allow people to unmute, but if anyone wants to comment, no, is there no chat either? Yeah. Okay, otherwise, thank you all for coming and tolerating my...
Gurunishta is trying to talk.
Can you hear me?
Oh.
We can't hear you.
So I'm not sure how to...
He has to put English and
Oh, yeah.
mute original audio.
Okay, if Gurunishta puts English and then mute original audio, I should be able to hear. I cannot hear.
Can you see him?
Actually, he's writing here that he's using his computer and he doesn't know how to do it on this one.
Tell him down there. Where is the world?
Gurunishta? Oh, now I hear you.
Okay. It's just one click. Pranam, thank you for the class. It was nice. I like that point that how like Krishna reveals our attachments. And I was wondering if you had any more thoughts on what does that exactly mean? Like Krishna reveals, like say for a sadhaka, like what does that mean? What does it look like in practice?
Oh, so that came up in a Swami call some weeks ago when someone asked, I think it was maybe Briggo who asked about the 10th offense. Like what does it mean that it is an offense to Krishna's name to maintain material attachments, even though one knows the glories of Krishna's name? And Guru Maharaj kind of gave the two translations of that offense. One translation is very how do you say, harsh. That translation is saying that it's an offense to Krishna's name to have attachments, even though one has heard the glories of Krishna's name. Whereas the more generous translation is it is an offense to maintain material attachments, even though one has understood the glories of Krishna's name. So that I think makes more sense also. And Guru Maharaj was saying there how like it will, like in the course of practice, it will become apparent to you time after time. Like if something kind of comes up time after time, like this is something I should give up, but then one still maintains that anartha or or so, then that is an offense. How it looks when it is revealed, I guess he can reveal it through, I guess, through circumstances. I'm trying to think of some example.
Do you think it could be said that the process of chanting is almost like the same thing as Krishna pulling up the chariot in front of the armies or something, and then you start chanting and all this stuff starts coming up? And that's kind of what Satyanarayan was saying in his book, I guess. You sit down and get really uncomfortable about just try to meditate or chant. I don't know. I've never thought of that chapter in that way, but it just came to me when he was talking about that.
Yes, actually, like now that you say it, I also made that connection from the commentary. That like when he was mentioning how people often say that they feel more disturbed since they started spiritual practice than before. And I remember when Doyal Hari was going out to sell books, going out from Audarya to sell books. He was saying that it's like telling people that, like, this book is telling you about problems that you didn't know that you have. So,
yeah.
And yeah, that is one way that Guru Maharaj has explained that, like, if you chant, then you will become distracted from the chanting, and then you can see that as Krishna showing you what it is that keeps you away from the chanting. So like it's actually a very practical way to get one's attachments revealed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have a comment or anything they want to share? If you do, you need to press English and mute original audio. Okay. Thank you all very much. I actually made it to the end of the hour, but that was because I was 10 minutes late also. I was not sure I would even be able to speak for 15 minutes. Okay, thank you all very much. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyaiva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.
Syamananda Prabhu.